All right, we're talking about end behavior in this lesson, right? So I'm gonna write that down just in case we forgot. So we're talking about end behavior of functions, okay? And what that means is how do functions behave, or what do they do as they, either go to the right or as they go to the left. And we have notation we're using for that. And if you're just starting with this video, I would highly recommend pausing it and watching the other one first, okay? Because there's two videos for this. The other one is going to do a much better job of just explaining the notation to you. And we're going to use the same notation now, but you might see it and go, well, where'd that come from? And I think the other video does a better job of explaining where it comes from and why we use it, okay? So let's get started on this. So like I said, I'm assuming you know how to use the notation as we're doing this. All right. So for this one, right, we're looking at, okay, what's happening here, and we're just looking at the general behavior as this thing goes either to the right or to the left. So as we're going to the right, so as we're going this way, right, so that's as x, and then remember we use our arrow, approaches positive infinity. So as it approaches positive infinity, as it's going this way, well, what's happening as it goes this way, and we're not talking about like in this area, we're just talking about towards the end of the function. So you'll notice that at the end of the function, it stops doing like all these different turns and crazy things, and it does something a little more planned, right? And what it's doing is it's going down, and it's going to continue to go down, right? So as x approaches positive infinity, if this thing is going down, that means f of x, which is your y, is approaching negative infinity. Okay, so this thing, as it's going to the right, this thing eventually is just going to keep going down to, to nowhere, right? To negative infinity, right? And then as you go to the left, so then as x approaches negative infinity, so we're talking about going this way, right? So as x is approaching negative infinity, y, our f of x, is also like the right-hand side, the left-hand side is doing the same thing. It's also going towards negative infinity. So that's something that you will see with nonlinear equations that you won't see with linear equations, because straight lines don't do that, right? They go in one direction. So when you split it up between the right and the left, it looks different. Okay, these you can get something like this. So as x is approaching negative infinity, as it's going this way, this thing is going down towards negative infinity. Okay, let's look at another. All right, let's get rid of this thing right here. So same deal. Okay, so as x approaches positive infinity, okay, f of x approaches, well, let's look and see what happens. Well, so as this thing goes this way, right, it's kind of going, it's going down, it's going down. And so this thing is approaching negative infinity again, right? So it's going down, it crosses zero, and it's going to continue. It might appear to like head towards negative infinity at a more shallow rate, but it's still eventually, that's where it's heading, right? It's going to get larger and larger negative numbers, right? Or smaller, if we're being technical about it. They look bigger, but that negative sign means that they're not big, right? So as x approaches negative infinity, so now we're looking at the left side of this, right? F of x, which is my y, approaches, well, this thing's going to keep going up. It's going to go up kind of slow, but it's going to continue to go up. And so that's going to approach positive infinity. So going down is approaching negative infinity. Going up is approaching positive. Another reason why I said I think talking about this, saying this out loud with words is a lot easier than it is using the notation. All right, last example here. So this one does some kind of crazy things, and it'll sort of throw you off. This is a cubic function, all right, and we'll learn about these later on. But if we look overall at this thing, it's from left to right. It's going up, right, and then it takes this, it goes down, all right, and then it hits this point, and then it turns and it starts going up again. So when we're talking about our end behavior, we are only looking at what's happening at the very end of it, right? It's All this stuff is interesting for sure, right? But for our purposes, we don't care about it, right? We just care about what's happening at the end of this, all right? So for as x approaches positive infinity, right, this thing goes up. So that would be f of x approaches positive infinity as well. And then as x approaches negative infinity, so as this thing goes to the left, so as this thing is going to the left, this is going down. F of x approaches negative infinity. So it kind of almost looks like a linear equation in this case, right? But it's not linear. And we know it's not linear because it's a curve, right? It's not a single straight line. So hopefully you're starting to get a handle on the notation and how this looks, and eventually we're going to be putting this all together, right? But that's where we're at for this, so I hope these videos have been helpful, and then you can get started on your practice sheet for this. So thank you very much.